Hey guys, we're gonna do something a little different this time. Instead of the usual gameplay, uh, we're gonna do something a series that I've enjoyed for years, which is Xenoblade. The lore is very interesting, and in my opinion, it's the greatest overarching story in any video game, and I really want to emphasize that because honestly, it doesn't get enough credit. Yeah, this is essentially the timeline, and it doesn't seem that long, but each of these are games, right? So, like, each game is very long games. Like, the shortest game is probably Xenosaga 2, and that's stretching like 16, 17 hours. We're just gonna start off with the basics, okay? We're gonna start off where the timeline begins, which is on planet Earth. Essentially, has kind of turned into a little semi-corporatism with the world, and a lot of the world is run by corporations, most prominently Vector Industries, which is uh, this logo, and the CEO is this man named Wilhelm, who has been around for a very long time, and we'll get more into him because he actually has such a hold on the series that it's pretty unrecognized because, well, he's only in the game. He's not even in the games that much. He's very much a separate entity that doesn't really show up until the end of the game. He kind of just plays behind the scenes. That's kind of his thing. So we don't see much of him. But we're on planet Earth. Vector Industries has a lot of power in the world, and I wouldn't be surprised if they also were prevalent within the government, which was called the coalition government, based on their behavior with the Zohar. So we'll get into the Zohar, but basically, at this point in time, Earth has already started to colonize different planets because lack of resources, their individual rights are being threatened. And what happens is, so Wilhelm commissions a excavation of the Earth. He excavates Kenya in Africa, and he finds something called the Zohar, which is integral to the overall plot of the Xeno series. The Zohar is this golden cross-looking thing. It also made appearances in Xenogears, but I'm not going to talk about Xenogears because there's not a lot of indication that would lead to Xenogears being canon. There's definitely been hints, but in the overall, correlation, it's hard to really see any correlation with it. But there are mentions of it, so we'll put that into account. And it has the Zohar in Xenogears, which is interesting. And actually, in Xenogears, I believe the Zohar gets destroyed, which was the first time the Zohar has ever been touched. Really, you can't touch the Zohar.
Let us join together.
Graf was able to. Is that his name? Graf? Graf was able to. What the fuck is his name? That name? I can't remember. So that is pretty incredible. And when we take into account how powerful the Zohar actually is, it is a perfect, unlimited energy resource. And when Earth is at the end of their resources and their scarcity resources, obviously the Zohar becomes a very coveted power, and a lot of people want it, including a man named Dmitry Yuriev, this guy who isn't as, he's not a very nice person. This is what he actually looks like. This is kind of when he takes over. We'll get to that later. yeah, so Yuriev has shown significant interest in it. He runs the Yuriev Institute on Earth. And we don't know much about his behavior on Earth, but we do know that he is desperately craving the Zohar. And we do know that he has a god complex.
To be a god. That right is now mine. The right to be a god. You. Arrogant even until the end. Only one truly capable of being a god deserves that right.
So, yeah. And there's actually another person with a god complex, but he's actually significantly better than Yuriev. Yuriev is definitely one of the most despicable villains in the Xeno series, and he actually comes very close to his plan. Of course, it was fated not to happen, but yeah, he is an ambitious person, and he's not friendly. What happens? So we'll go into Nephilim. Nephilim. What ends up happening is Vector gives the Zohar to the government, the coalition government, probably as a ploy. We don't know why Vector would do that. My belief is that Vector gave it to the government, the coalition government, as a way to kind of dodge cover. Vector was definitely very significant role in just in general in the world, and particularly to the head researcher of the Zohar was a doctor named Grimoire in Toronto, Canada. And unfortunately for Grimoire, the experiment went completely wrong. He used his daughter as a test subject. As soon as Nephilim touched the Zohar, and she completely disappeared. She completely vanished from existence. And you'll see that as a trend with those that touch the Zohar, is that as soon as you come in contact with it, then more often than not, you will just vanish. Which makes Xenogears very impressive, because they were able to actually touch it. That alone is very an impressive feat. So I think that's pretty crazy. And that's why I like to conclude it a little bit. Maybe in some alternate universe that happened. Where she goes, she went to the center of the universe, come in contact with essentially the closest thing to God physically in our universe, which was Udu. And Udu was a very curious being.
Udu.
What happens is, whenever you come in contact with Udu is like this red tendril being, but it also can take shape of a child. Whenever someone comes in contact with it, they get an overwhelming fear of death. Udu became very interested in Nephilim because she was not falling to that same effect like some other people have in the future, which we'll mention. But yeah, she went into a place called the imaginary numbers domain, which is kind of like, think of it like this. So this is kind of the, this is what it looks like. This is basically the universe, and the lower domain is where we exist. In the center of the universe, Udu resides. You see, Udu has made contact with the lower domain. Yeah, so that's kind of like how the universe is. And everything that happens is in the lower domain. Measuring number domain is the consciousness of every human and sentient life. So the consciousness, while the real number domain is the actual physical form of them. The imaginary is kind of like, so their soul, essentially. And if you get rid of that soul,
Do you really want this?
then they're
useless
just
husk?
a lifeless husk, essentially. So when somebody dies, this is another important thing to understand, is when somebody dies, their imaginary number domain, their consciousness, enters the collective unconscious. We know of this because the UMN, which was, who invented the UMN? I can't remember. So okay, here's nothing that Vector made. Now, okay, this is getting in Xenosaga territory, so I gotta be careful. I'll just mention this one thing because it's important. Vector invented the UMN, or the Unus Mundus network, which uses the collective unconscious to enter the imaginary numbers domain. And specifically, you use something called an encephalon dive unit to enter it. That is the only way you can get it, essentially. Which people have developed, I believe. Yeah. Joachim Mizrahi. So, oh my god, there's just so much. Okay. Anyways, so Nephilim disappears. Grimoire is, in despair, and his project is a complete failure. They remove the project from him, and it goes back to Vector. Or did I do that? Was that wrong? Actually, I believe that was the case. I believe. Maybe I think I got that wrong. I actually think the government has it. Okay, yeah. Grimoire is a Vector Industries scientist. So, and the government gets possession of Zohar. You know what? It doesn't even matter who gets it, because at the end of the day, Vector and the coalition government are interlinked. They are one of the same so I think it really doesn't matter who has it, actually, now that I think about it. They try to find a way to harness power because people are afraid that once they touch it, they just fucking evaporate, which is pretty terrifying. So that alone is pretty bad, okay? It's bad, okay? Like, it's very bad. So they have to find a way to harness it, and fast, because the Earth is slowly dying, okay? They make something called the Beanstalk, which is this thing, first low orbit station. And actually, we know that this is in the Xenosaga universe because there is another thing which is in Xenosaga 3. You go to a place called 5th Jerusalem, way in the future, 4,000 years later. They have another base. I can't remember the name of it, but it was another first low orbit station that appeared in Xenosaga 3. So we do know that the technology was there. It completely encircles the entirety of the planet. A giant ring around the planet, and the station up top is where they put the Zohar, right in the peak of the station. This is similar to a space elevator, I believe we called it. Here's another look at it. As you can see, it's a little different here. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is kind of like a memory of it. But it connects all the way down to Earth. Here's another look at it. It's kind of like the inside environment of it. We'll get to this later. This is important, actually. This kind of dry landscape. You'd be like, why is this here? We'll get to that. Also called Radamanthus Port. This is what it's supposed to look like. So it's go up, and you get geostationary orbit altitude right there, and you have to have a counterweight up top. I mean, look at this. I mean, it's insane, but they did it, and this is like an actual thing that's going on. Like, people are going to make this at some point. So it's anchored at the equator. Now, this is interesting. There's a lot of speculation on where it was actually created. Technically speaking, it would have to be South America, Africa. But it doesn't seem right. You see where it is, and I think the closest thing it could be is Venezuela. But Venezuela right now is not great. But we can't even take that into account. I did some research on it. There is you visit the remnants of it in Xenoblade 2 of Earth. And based on the interstate signs, there's an interstate that matches one in Denver, Colorado. And from what we know and how it looked in Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed, it looks like a mountainous area. And I've been to Denver, Colorado, and I've seen, obviously this shit ton of mountains. So I think it has to be in Denver, but it wouldn't make sense because it had to be in the equator. But maybe Earth has changed, and maybe they have enough technological innovation to do that. It seems to be in the United States, though, so I think that's the most likely. There are 4 essential things that are within the low orbit station. The first one is this fucking monstrosity. Okay, get used to this shit. This is the Artifice Ion, considered the most powerful artifice ever created. And what an artifice is an autonomous organism that can, I guess it's not autonomous, it's a robot that is linked through the power of the Zohar, meaning its power all originates from the Zohar. So if you get rid of the Zohar, none of the artifices work. And this is the supreme, strongest artifice ever made, and its sole purpose was to destroy the world in the event of a catastrophe, which, spoiler alert, the director of the Beanstalk allows it. And I don't know who the director is, I don't know who it is, but we know that Wilhelm wasn't there, so that's important. Second most important thing is this thing, the Trinity processor. Basically, it's a supercomputer that stores information about the world. And once again, it's linked with the Zohar. A lot of these things I'm about to mention, they're all linked to the Zohar. And each of them have their own designated assignments. So we have Numa, Logos, and Antos. Those 3 different. It's kind of like an Evangelion Balthazar, where they had three brains, like real brains, like the actual computer. But these things are extremely important. These 3 stones, very important. The next one that's important is Elysium. Elysium is supposed to look like this. On this orbital station, doesn't look like it. I mean, this thing is huge. You gotta understand. This thing is massive. It's like a space station that has its own environment, and people are gonna live up there because Earth is becoming so bad. It's kind of like WALL-E. The Earth is polluted and it's going to shit. So they have Elysium up here as like the new city center for Earth. And we know that they do this because in Xenosaga 3, there is a place that looks exactly like it, called the Kukai Foundation. This is what it looks like. Which is the same purpose as Elysium, and it looks exactly the same. The final thing to mention is the Zohar itself. And specifically, who is assigned with the Zohar. It's this guy, this dude. You have Yuriev and Klaus. They're experimenting with the Zohar. They've created this orbital station. They found a way to... They haven't found it, but they believe they found a way to create a new world and become God. Not to become God, but to create a new world. There's some people that want to become God. Like this man who wants to become God. Yuriev wants the power of the Zohar. And Klaus just is so in despair of the world.
Requires no spirit, it would be a perfect world.
There's a huge power struggle for the Zohar. Yuriev makes his move, and he attacks low orbit station. And from what we know, it's pretty bad. Not only is the orbit station, but I do know that the city centers and Earth itself was also destroyed pretty severely. And Yuriev controls a organization called the Salvadors, but they are also known as the Saviorite rebels during the Earth period of time. They're known as the Salvadors later, mainly because Yuriev kind of evolves over time, and he's able to keep enduring forever. And the name Saviorite rebels kind of disappears because not many people remember Earth. In fact, they don't even call it Earth; they call it Lost Jerusalem. Eventually, but we'll get to that later. So they attack. The artificers attack. The director. This is the moment where I think Klaus realized we have to do this now. The director is initializing Ion, which its prime directive is to destroy the Earth, destroy everything. That pushed Klaus over the edge to activate the Zohar, and before he did it, here's another important bystander that Galea from Zone. So Galea steps in and is like, we're not about to do this. But the important thing is she's there. Galea tries to talk Klaus down. Klaus isn't having it. He activates Zohar. The world kind of disappears. The moment he clicks the button and activates the Zohar energy goes around the entire Earth, circling, using the orbital ring to circle the Earth, and the Earth disappears. And here's what's interesting. All the planets that were colonized go to their star maps and they see that the Earth has vanished out of existence, and they don't know why. It's completely vanished. We know that Klaus obviously was there, Galea was there, Dmitry Yuriev was not there because he shows up in Xeno-Saga. He was on some other planet that we don't know. Wilhelm wasn't there. So the only characters that were affected by this, Klaus and Galea. But Ion gets transported. Elysium gets transported. Now the Trinity processor is interesting. All three of them were transported, but one of them was unable to make the full transmission, and instead it was far-flung into another universe. That's not in the Xenosaga universe. Does that make? I don't know if that makes sense to you guys. This shit is complicated. I hate to be the guy who does this, but it's true. It's complicated. Now this is when it gets confusing. Okay, so we've gotten to the part where the universe is split, but there was another space-time continuum which split the world in two. Now, if you want to know the truth, the actual planet Earth was transported to Xenoblade 2. So you are on Earth. Now the difference is you are enveloped in a cloud sea. So instead of a land, there is just clouds, and you can fly in the clouds. It's kind of sick, actually. And beneath the cloud sea is where you can find the remnants of Earth. And that world is called All Rest. And then Xenoblade 1, you're in a different dimension. The world is flat. There's nothing but boundless sea and two giant titans that you reside on. Also in the cloud sea, there's titans that's where you live. But in this world, it's just like a different pocket dimension. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Xenoblade and Xenosaga are happening at the exact same time. 4,000 years later, we get Xenosaga. Yuriev is still around. 4,000 years in the future. Okay. Where do we start? There's so much. Like, I don't even know where to begin. But the important thing is that's where it this is where it's round up. Okay, so now we understand the basis of the timeline, where the Xenosaga games are the world which didn't get transported to all the different planets that got colonized. This is Xenosaga. Now, the planet Earth that got transported, that is Xenoblade. So it's hard to comprehend, I know, but that is the foundation of it. I think we're gonna end it there because I don't know how much more I can talk about this. It's complicated.